Well, let's address the elephant of sorts in the room that has gained a lot of steam in terms of online and enough for Lincoln Riley to be asked about it. And certainly everyone within the Oklahoma camp needs to know, meaning the Oklahoma fan base that just focuses on the Sooners. Understand guys like Jimbo Fisher are being asked the same question concerning the LSU job. So James Franklin's being asked about it. There are all sorts of top line coaches that are being asked about, the big jobs that are open. And we've got two mammoth vacancies in college football with USC and LSU, and some other ones. Even before we've gotten to the end of the season, Jason, and the typical Black Friday, I call it Black Friday. I guess it's Black Sunday after the last regular season game and the flood of job openings with firings. We've already opened up USC, LSU, Texas Tech, TCU, Washington State for other reasons are open. So we're going to have a wild December in filling job vacancies because, of course, it creates a domino effect. So as soon as it's just not 7 or 8 jobs, it becomes 15 or 20 jobs.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And, Lincoln's been linked to a couple of things before from the NFL. I think this is the first legitimate, legitimate, I don't know the right word to say, the way that he's being pulled, and things like that. So I think the first and foremost, I think if a team like LSU comes calling it, something that he probably listens to. I don't know that he necessarily has, even if it's just leverage for a pay raise. I mean, at the very least, coaches have been known to do that a lot of times in the past. But I think it's something that he would probably have to listen to. For one, it's a really good job. I mean, I don't know that I would. It's an interesting discussion. I don't know if I would characterize it as a better job than Oklahoma. It's definitely. I don't know that I would say that it's worse. A worse job. I think the one thing that you can think of from an LSU perspective is they can probably pay him more money than Oklahoma would be willing to pay him. Not that they're not willing to pay him, but I think LSU would probably open up the checkbook to make him the highest paid coach in college football, should that be something that he wanted to do. And I think that one of the things that Oklahoma had as far as that would be in the past, that maybe Oklahoma has an easier path to win a national championship in the Big 12 versus the SEC. Well, they're on even playing ground now, for all intents and purposes, whenever that happens. So I don't know. I think one of the things that me and you talked about early on in the year, before the season even started with Oklahoma, was the expectations that they had coming into the season, which was almost playoff or play in a national championship game or bust. And barring a miracle at this point, I mean, there's a path, but they still need some things to happen. But Oklahoma probably won't even make the playoffs this year. So I think all of us talking about Oklahoma, previewing them, and just looking at them, thought it would be a pretty massive disappointment should Oklahoma not make the playoffs. And then I remember saying this: just does it get to a situation with Lincoln where he believes that he can't win a championship at Oklahoma? And so, at the end of the day, that's something that maybe he's thinking about in the back of his mind. I don't think he'll go. I mean, I don't, even if they open up the checkbook, but I wouldn't be surprised if he went. But I don't necessarily think that he would go. Now, I mean, it's enticing. Like if a school like LSU wants to make you the highest paid head coach in the country, I mean, it's hard to say no. I mean, I know you listen to, and you've had him on your show, listen to Josh Pate a lot, and he said, really, one of the things that he said, he believes that LSU maybe is a better job than Oklahoma. And just one of the things, Nick Saban's probably the only person that wouldn't listen if outside of that, most maybe not Dabo at Clemson, but and maybe Ryan Day at Ohio State, but you know, a large contingent of coaches would listen, including Jimbo. So, um, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see how that, how that manifests itself through the end of the season. To your, kind of to your point on the Black Sunday or whatever, just in terms of all the coaching vacancies that will come open. I certainly think Aranda would probably be he's definitely going to be a hot commodity, whether it's even looking at the LSU situation or wherever that might be.
It is an interesting comparison to make between LSU and Oklahoma as job status. Oklahoma under Lincoln Riley, and even before that with Bob Stoops, is more of a consistent winner. How much of that has to do with playing in a different conference, we don't know.
Yeah.
And LSU has been a little bit more uneven, certainly, in regards to being competitive. They now are working on 2 consecutive down seasons, and I mean down, not 8-4 down, 500 record down. But of course, they've peaked to win national championships 3 times in the last 18 seasons.
And I think that's Mark, it's kind of funny that Barry Switzer had talked about for years and years about the monster that is the Oklahoma just football program, the expectations and things like that. And right now, Oklahoma, the monster is kind of, I think, at its peak, just in terms of Oklahoma has had the longest drought in program history without winning a national championship, with their last one being in 2000. So, 21, 22 years at this point without winning a national championship. So, I mean, like it or not, at a school like Oklahoma, that's the expectation. I mean, not every year, obviously, but going 20 years without a championship is really something that the fans don't really tolerate very well. So I think there's more agitation, I think, this year based on where Oklahoma's at. And I think, specifically with the expectations. And, I know a lot of Oklahoma fans probably don't like to hear this, and maybe people listening here don't like to hear this, but this team is probably, the way they've played on the field is probably a fringe top 25 team right now. They're top 15 because of their respect and because of the name, and they've won the games in front of them. When you look at the way that they've played on the field, you go all the way back to Tulane. Tulane is a respectable program year in and year out. Not necessarily this year. They've won one football game. Um, we've talked about the issues that Nebraska has had. Over this year, and not necessarily a bad football team, but just always continuously finding ways to lose. And their best win is, you could argue, Kansas State versus Texas. And Texas, I mean, a complete dumpster fire right now. And um, so yeah, I mean, I think that the saving grace for Oklahoma fans is they at least we're not in the same situation that Texas is in. But I think at the same time that monster is growing, and that they expect, especially in seasons like this where the expectations were a um, at the very least a national championship game appearance. And like I said, barring some chaos down the stretch, that's the playoffs probably isn't even going to happen. And I don't know. I mean, we'll get into the Iowa State and Oklahoma State, but the Iowa State's still a really good football team. Given, especially, I know that they've lost 4 games, but they're still a really good football team. And Oklahoma's only a 4-point favorite at home against an unranked team. So I mean, that kind of shows where um, the value that I think this Oklahoma football team has currently in its current state.